What we'll do, we'll have a quick ride through a couple of topics and ultimately end up understanding better, hopefully, what makes teams perform. We'll start with a handful of scientific insights, starting with Kurt Lewin, the Jewish psychologist. And we'll have even Mr. Rumsfeld over there, one of the greatest philosophers of our times, as you might know. But finally, we'll end up understanding what actually drives us. So what is this thing between our eyes and behind our ears that actually makes us behave? But it all starts with that movement we are more or less part of, the Agile Manifesto, that basically is about emancipation. Emancipation from work collaterals that don't suit us anymore. So those management 1.0 styles. Why is this? It's because it states that we should build projects around motivated individuals and give them trust, which is a new ingredient to the whole game because trust wasn't invented before. Management 1.0, so what you experience in your daily work, trust is non-existent. You try to order people to make things that you want them to do. That sometimes works and most times doesn't. So what changes? The guy that has been your bossy project manager is said to be merged or morphed into a servant leader, which is quite hard for a person to achieve. Because how do you do that if you're used to being served? How do you twist your mind around serving other people? So, with all that agile thing, there comes a lot of openness and transparency, which we are not used to either. And that means you can't hide less pleasant things under the carpet anymore, or you just get a bigger carpet. The things that are there and don't work will surface, so you can't put them away anymore. And there's a lot of unknown challenges coming up with trust, which is a mutual thing. You trust someone or you don't. There's a couple of questions that weren't there before. So trusting people is something that you have to build up over time. And once you lose it, it's gone. So basically, becoming agile is about changing attitudes. And attitudes is the most difficult thing to change in humans. And I'm somehow qualified to tell you that because I'm a studied psychologist and I'm an agile trainer, and I go through that for quite some years. So becoming agile is changing attitudes. Unfortunately, it's not about changing technologies. They are interesting, and this is why we're here. Fun fact, I put my speech into that curriculum announcing that I wouldn't name a single Atlassian product. Nevertheless, they took me. Because it's not about technology, it's about people, you and me, and all the people that you work with. So how do you change things that don't work anymore? Change can be quite easy, because people change their behavior quickly if it's fun. Like that Pokemon Go thing last year. Out of a sudden, out of nothing, people were running around with their smartphones, chasing things that don't exist, and had a lot of fun with it. So millions of people around the globe did so, without ever asking if it makes sense. No, it didn't, but they liked it. People are spending hours in those virtual games and pay real money that they earned before to spend it on virtual things that just don't exist, just to spend more time into environments that don't exist. And if something hits the needs of people, there's rocketing adoption rates, like the adoption rates of mobile things, smartphones. Every one of you has one. Mostly it doesn't leave your hand for 24 hours. So you sleep or have a shower. And things change. When did you last see a commuter reading a newspaper in the subway? I tried to spot one this morning. There were two in the whole train, and I walked around. Everyone else was just like clinging to this magic piece of glass. So things change. We don't read papers anymore. We are staring to our smartphones as if this was the link to life, which it is, basically. For me, it's my brain. Without that, I wouldn't remember being here. So in our turn to understand what makes teams perform, let's have a quick stop at what shapes behavior, actually. So what is it that is our behavior? How do we change it? There's a rather trivial formula to start with Kurt Lewin. He says, well, whatever we do happens in that quadrant. It's social norms, our individual intentions, if we are able to name them. It's our capabilities and situative options. You know, all that, norms, rules, motivations, faculties, it's all that soft fabric in between that you can't really measure or get your hand on. And he put that into a trivial formula, which is behavior is a function of the person and its environment. It's a heuristical formula, so there's no scientific proof for that, but it turns out that this is not too far from reality. And also we know that we cannot change people. Try it with your significant other. Good luck. It doesn't work. So if you can't change people, you have to nudge behavior by changing its environment. And the environment is the social space that we live in, that we try to thrive. In a workplace, it's the organizational structure that we're sort of hired into. And there's that little functionality around. If you want people to change, then remind them of the change you want to have. Make it a routine action. In agile teams, you have that stand-ups, that daily stand-ups that quickly form a habit of exchanging information every day at the same time. And if it works, reward it. But start small, nudge structures first, and celebrate change. So celebrate if the fifth daily stand-up just worked without anyone complaining. Small steps to change behavior. But all this is embedded into the corporate culture that you're working in, which is the organizational operating system that we're with. Edgar Schein, oh no, come on. There's something wrong with the machine here. PowerPoint stopped. No, it's still working. It needs to download. No, it doesn't need to download a font. I have no idea what that is. No, go ahead.
Won't let us.
No, go ahead. We just, no, I think we're somewhere else. Oh yeah, here we are. So, Edgar Schein said, well, this is the example of water lilies. So you have the visible artifacts that define the manifest organizational structures and processes. How do people dress? How do they attend meetings? Is there an agenda? Is there minutes afterwards? How do people learn stuff that they don't know? How is social events handled? And how do corporations handle disagreements and conflict? Beyond that, you have the values, which is the strategies, more or less outspoken, the philosophies, which sociologists call espouse justifications. So things that you try to name, but you're mostly unable to name because it's buried deep inside your values. And even below that, on the ground floor, you have those assumptions, so those taken for granted beliefs. Things work the way that they work here, without giving any evidence. And these are the ultimate source of action. So William Schneider, again, built a simple model about corporate cultures by simply asking the question, well, how do we do things here to succeed? Which everyone can ask and answer. A trivial model also, the x-axis goes from people-oriented to company-oriented, the y-axis from reality to possibility. Those adjectives around there give you a quick glimpse of what it might be. And if you try to position yourself or the company you work for within that quadrant, you're most likely there. So control, keeping control, most important thing in our century. We have the competence quadrant, trying to be the best. We have the cultivation thing, that's more sort of a spiritual approach. and the collaboration culture where all of us want to be, ultimately, working together. This is why you're here. To make it simple, we have this quadrant named like military, so paramilitary organizations, a clear top-down structure, someone giving orders, other people following orders. We have more a university approach, a church-like spiritual arrangement, where you try to cultivate the best of people. And you have that family collaboration aspect. This is where you want to be, and most likely you are in the middle between the military, paramilitary, or university approach. So this is where most of us are, because companies these days just work as that. So what does it mean? If you want to change that, if you want to move from one quadrant to the other, conventionally you start a change program, but unfortunately change programs don't work that well. They fail, mostly they fail because those people that are asked to change are not part of the process, so they cannot steer the process. They are forced to change into something different, which is not too comfortable because as humans we just like things to be as they are. We don't like change. This is not wired in our genes. So why is this? Why do we resist change? It's because we have two fundamental mechanisms between our ears. One is attraction, the other one is fear. The attraction of gaining something that we don't have, the fear of losing something that we had or have. Could be status, money, esteem, privileges, that little tiny corner office, the business car, whatever, the larger phone. But all that mixes up with the wish to become more agile, because the things you have that you fear to lose will eat up any agile movement quickly. Peter Drucker says that culture eats strategy for breakfast, so there's no original source for that, but it's true. If there's a culture that doesn't support agility, just don't do it. Nudge structures first. Try to change the organization before you want to become agile. Everything else is bound to die. And why is that? Because change cannot be ordered. Put yourself in the shoes of those that fear that change, that have to lose something. You can wait for those folks, because this is the managers. And maneggiare in Italian means to steer horses, to lead them by the hand, lead people like you lead a horse, which is difficult if the horses don't want to be led anymore. In an agile environment, you don't lead. So with everything you try in agile transitions and self-organizing teams, the middle management suffers most because they are not needed anymore. You don't have project managers. What you have is product owners or scrum masters. Scrum masters are servant leaders. Middle management doesn't want to serve other people, well, except those that are above them, probably. So those people suffer most, because what they fear to lose is influence, power. This goes away with any agile movement. So what do you do with those people? Craig Larman set up his four laws of organizational behavior, which is organizations are implicitly optimized to avoid changing the status quo, because it's so handsome sitting in your corner office. Any change initiative will be reduced to redefining that change to basically everything that it has been before, so you nihilize whatever is going on. And it will be sooner or later derided as too theoretical or religious or whatever, needing pragmatic customization. And whenever you've been in a company that tried to introduce Kanban or Agile or task boards, whatever, it is twisted so long that it just looks the same as it has been. So there's no change. We are resistant to change. So what he says is culture follows structure, which is basically the same than Peter Drucker said with culture eats structure for breakfast. So we're here now, halfway, trying to find an answer to the question how to nudge those corporate structures. One learning from a massive scientific body of longitudinal studies is that you cannot do so at will. You can't go big steps, you have to go baby steps. And the most important thing, you have to live by example. So if leaders don't lead in the sense of show behavior that they want to induce into the people that they lead, it just doesn't work. So why is this? This is because the leader's attitude shapes the behavior of all the others that follow that leader. And if that is reinforced, again, you have that little circle. And if you're lucky and you do your job well, then your behavior influences the behavior of other people. So only when you change the system again and again, because it's important, people's behavior changes. The tricky point is that those transitions from waterfall, free model, whatever model you know, to agile models is a systemic challenge. Systemic means the whole system of the organization and its people is under risk, because no one knows what happens. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. So in those transition processes, organizations have to handle systemic challenges. It's people challenges, it's structural challenges, it's the challenge of what tools to use, what tools not to use, how to behave. So you need to make a fish fly, basically. Change it while it's swimming. And because those transitions are the uneasy phase between a new stability, so having the new without having ditched the old, there's many unknowns, so things you don't know. And now, to our rescue, there's Donald Rumsfeld. Could you please put the sound up? Technique. There's some audio, please put it up. Or we start over. However,
that is to say, we know
do we hear it?
Things we do not know. But there are also unknowns. The ones we don't know, we don't know.
Excuse me, but is this an unknown unknown?
I'm not.
Several unknowns, and I'm just
I'm
wondering.
not going to say which it is.
But, Mr. Secretary,
You know, I'm right here.
if you believe
I'm right
something,
here.
So we just start over. Donald Rumsfeld, this was the moment when he announced that there was those infamous weapons of mass destruction that they suspected Iraq to have. And the trick was that he induced a new category in our logic, the unknown unknown. So the things you know you know. Again, the things you know you don't know. This is the dark matter in between. You don't know what happens. And this is the small point where we have to deal with risk and the unknown. So how do people choose between those alternatives that they don't know? How do we act under risk? How do we act in a transition whose endpoint we don't know? What happens? Daniel Kahneman is the most important living psychologist, I think even the only one that got a Nobel Prize for his work in economics, funnily. And to sum up what he said is that we are not rational creatures. We are instinct-driven for a reason. And we have the innate tendency to avoid risks. Whatever comes, we don't risk anything. And, which is the second line, we are prone to myriads of systematic biases. So we are not able to rationally decide what is good and what is not good. And this is important for that middle management, which is often called the stubborn middle management, because they don't want to lose anything. So we are only risk averse if we want to preserve what we have, but if the house is on fire, we are able to take risk. So if you want to have that agile transition work out, it's better that your house burns, then everything is fine and nice, and numbers are good. And again, this is why middle management suffers most. They are prone to lose everything they have, status, esteem, money, power, and they don't know what is there to gain. So they resist change. And if you have been in any agile transition project, you will sooner or later encounter exactly that. They will break you out. And I understand that. So what does it mean? People tend to avoid risk when seeking gains, again, but choose risks to avoid sure losses. So only if there's something to lose, and you're sure to lose that, you're able to take the agile train. In any other case, you'll have a hard time. So where is this systematical bias? You would certainly say that I don't have it, you don't have it, there's nothing like that. Oh, there's tons of biases, hundreds. And we know, I don't know, that 120 or so biases that systematically twist our decisions, that make us unable to decide rationally. You know all of them by heart, because as a human you go through them every day. So let's pick up two, like the confirmation bias. We tend to listen to information that supports the opinion that we have already. So we have a hard time accepting new bits of information that would turn us in a different direction. You, everyone. So this is human, this is a human incapability, so to say. Quite similar is the conservation bias, the conservatism bias, that says that we try to seek information that supports what we know already, and we try to stay away from information that would turn us around. Same thing, different angle. But now for the really scary stuff, which is psychology, which tells us how humans work, which is a bonus track to becoming agile. Because to become agile, you're better off understanding how you work and how your co-workers actually tick. And this is the human operating system, our kernel. This is what we are made from. So what is it? And where did we know it from? For the last 10, 12 years, there's a new technology called frequency, magnetic, whatsoever. You know all those machines. People are put into those large computers, magnetoscanning. What actually is measured is the amount of oxygen in the brain at certain areas, and this is quite a high-resolution thing, so you can experiment with living people, and while they think, you can sort of take probes of where that thinking happens in the brain, measured by the amount of oxygen that is allocated in that part of the brain. And that works quite well, and this is done intensively, so there's a huge body of evidence that supports sentences like this. Social pain is equal to physical pain. Physical pain is located at exactly the same areas than social pain, like being neglected, not being seen, whatever. If you hit your knee, it activates the same brain areas than if you're taken out of a group or not accepted. So social needs are primary needs then. If it's like not having pain, it's like not having social trouble. And there's this David Rock, a neuroscientist, who developed a simple model called SCARF that explains quite simply why we are attracted by the things we like and we are distracted by those that we don't like. So it's like the same thing like attraction and fear that we had before. But the new thing about it is it's inside every one of us. We are remote controlled by our brain's wiring, and we can't do anything against it. We try to maximize rewards, and we try to minimize threats. As simple as. He's been putting that into a model, SCARF, and he says, well, there's status, certainty, autonomy, relatedness, and fairness. This is what we thrive. This is what we want to have in any social group. And agile is all about social. And there's a couple of experiments that show us that, but before that, we think we can quickly deal with the most important pyramid outside of Egypt. Mr. Maslow invented that. Unfortunately, it's all rubbish, because he never provided any scientific data, and he admitted in his late years that he just made it up. So don't use that anymore. If you use it in your presentations, kill that slide. It's just not true. There's no sustainable data that supports his view. So it's deprecated, more or less. But what it's not is, and there's audio again, please, a little experiment with primates. It's about a minute long or so.
Get a grape and you will see what happens.
And I run you through.
So she gives a rock to us, that's the task. And we give her a piece of cucumber and she eats it. The other one needs to give a rock to us. And that's what she does. And she gets a grape. And she eats it. The other one sees that. She gives a rock to us now, gets again cucumber. She tests a rock now against the wall. She needs to give it to us. And she gets cucumber again.
So that's equally true for us. If we see that we are treated unfairly, so other people are doing the same work and getting different payment, we don't like that. We stand that for a couple of days or weeks probably, but we don't stand it in the long run. We are not very different from primates. But we're different in a way that we have emotions. And there's that old saying that without emotion, reason gets nowhere. And again, Kahneman brought up the dual process theory of the brain, which is which doesn't mean that we have two brains, so physically, but we have two systems in our brains that make us behave. So the one system is fast, intuitive, associative. It's not, well, we can't switch it off. This is what drives us from morning to night. This is nothing that we can intentionally steer. The other system, system 2, is slow, it's deliberate, it's thoughtful, and we need to focus our attention to it. You can have that experience right now if you answer the question, what is 13 times 27? Yes, that's the switch. You have to activate another way of thinking to calculate that. Until here, you're just listening, but this institutionalizes another parts of your activity. So this is what we formally called I, so me, myself. And it's nothing new. Plato, without any scientific evidence, had that thousands of years before. He said that, well, if reason is the charioteer, he needs the black horse and the white horse, the good emotions and the bad ones, if there's any, to run in sync, to go into a certain direction. Which is true in a sense, but scientifically it's not. But what we can take away from that is without emotion, reason gets nowhere. Which means that we can deprecate Mr. Freud also and his theories, which were only theories without any scientific data, bringing us to the simple fact that the ratio that drives our business world actually is made afloat by all the emotions that we carry around and don't cater. Which again, speaking about agile transitions, is what we float on. It's the emotions. And if we don't deal with those, we won't be able to sustain the whole iceberg. This is because our social traits are pretty much older than ratio. Our human operating system is 300,000 years old, and it's pretty robust. So as humans, we learned for quite a long time how to survive, and we survived with emotions. And if you would put that guy in a suit, you wouldn't be able to spot him at any airport gate. We are not that different from the people that are on Earth since 300,000 years, because it's revolving all around the same. Shelter, community, and trying to resist aggression from the external. And there were people too. If you give them a different model than those bumpy Neanderthalers, they also had emotions. And this is robust. We are driven by emotions ever since. And again, the workplace is a social system, so we should stop treating people as hairy computers. We are not. We are full of emotions. And we can't stop using them, because we are wired physiologically and neurologically by social interaction. And there's a lot of proof for that. Whenever we do nothing, whenever our brains are idle, whenever we don't have to calculate numbers, we think social. Why is this guy looking so strangely at me? Well, what about that blonde lady yesterday? Blah, 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 blah. This is this chit-chat in the back of your head that starts immediately when you don't do any productive things. Every one of us has that same thing. So the workplace is a social system, and it's not an economic transaction that you're in. It could be. It's an exchange of your time against something that you produce for the people that give you the money. But it is a social system. It's not an economical system. So respect is more important than rank. Respect costs you nothing. And rank is just a word. So rounding up, what makes teams perform? And whenever we don't know what to do, we look what Google did. What Google did, 5 years long, it spent $11 million into a long-term understanding, or trial at least, to understand why teams perform and why they don't. 5 years later, there was no evidence. So they spent $11 million without finding anything. Well, there's two small things that they found. The team composition didn't make any difference. But what made a difference is how people interact. So all those high performers that you gather to be the outstanding team of the year doesn't matter that much. It matters more how you assist and help those people to interact, to do things together. And finally, understanding and influencing group norms. So the way that we interact with each other is the key to improving team performance. And again, this is about emotion and empathy. So the above average teams when Google scrutinized them had two shared behaviors. Conversational turn-taking, which basically means that everyone should talk, not only the alpha animals or those experts that think they know it best, and empathy. So this is a hard animal, because empathy is something that we read about sometimes. Or say, oh, okay, I have it, or not. But this was the most interesting data point, that if you measure the social sensitivity that people have, and you have more of those with an above average empathy factor whatsoever, then things work, and those teams perform. So it's the conversational turn-taking, it's that psychological safety to speak out without being bashed for it, and it's empathy. And unfortunately, this is behavior or traits that you don't learn, that you have to practice. And the good news is you can learn it. You can practice. A fun fact, McKinsey, which is not really known well for their Management 3.0 capabilities, they have an internal course that you can book that teaches you awareness and self-awareness and mindfulness and all that yoga stuff. You wouldn't have guessed that from McKinsey, but they do. So if they start, we should start too, probably. So to recap, we are hardwired. Our brains are made to make us behave social. We avoid risk when we seek gains, but if the house burns, we take risks. Our operating system is pretty old and robust, and we can't change that on will. We are not rational, but instinct-driven, every single one of us. And we are systematically biased, so we just can't help being biased. And the workplace is a social system. So if you want to change the social system, it's a systematic change, and it means to change the structure first. And leaders' behavior guides team behavior. So changing learned attitudes, becoming agile, works through empathy, realizing emotions, and psychological safety. This is what Google found out. And that's it. And I'm 30 minutes something. And that's it. And we can quickly go through a question and answer thing if there's one.